to the November 15th, 2022 regularly scheduled Garrett County Board of Education meeting. I'd like to thank everybody tuning in this evening, and we do have some people here with us as well, and on such a snowy night. So with that being said, I would like everyone to stand. We'll take a moment of silence first, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which I will lead tonight since our student member was unable to attend. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, our first order of business will be to approve the agenda. I'll take a motion as such. Motion approved by Matthew, seconded by Jason. Discussion? All those in favor of the agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the agenda is approved. Approval of consent agenda. Take a motion for that. Moved by Rodney. Seconded by Matthew. All those in favor of the consent agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And approval of the October 11th public session minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Anyone saw? Hearing none, take a motion as such.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Matthew.
Second.
Second by Jason. Discussion? All those in favor of the minutes as presented for October 11th, 2022, special or public session, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Approval of the November 10th, 2022 public session minutes. Are there any additions or corrections?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Matthew. All those in favor of the November 10th, 2022 public session minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the superintendent will now read us the closed session summary and announcements.
All right, October 11th, 2022, the Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, October 11th, 2022 at 4:07 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items. Review of executive session minutes, personnel topics pursuant to 3-305B1, and administrative function topics. Jason Van Sickle made a motion to go into executive session, and Rodney Gotfeldy seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried with yea votes for Rodney Gotfeldy, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. Matthew Paul was absent at this part of the meeting. Rodney Gotfeldy made a motion to approve the executive session agenda. Monica Rinker seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried with yea votes from Rodney Gotfeldy, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. Matthew Paul was absent at this part of the meeting. The topics discussed in the closed session include the following. Executive session minutes, September 19th, 2022. The board discussed minor revisions to the minutes. Jason Van Sickle made a motion to approve the September 19th, 2022 executive session minutes as amended. And Monica Rinker seconded the motion. Final resolution, the motion carried with yea votes from Rodney Gotfeldy, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. Matthew Paul was not present at this part of the meeting. Personnel. Tenured staff recommendation. The board discussed the tenured staff recommendation. The board took action on the topic in the public session under the consent agenda. The board discussed various administrative function topics. The board considered these topics but did not take any action on the items. Jason Van Sickle made a motion to adjourn the executive session, and Rodney Gotfeldy seconded the motion. Motion carried with yea votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Gotfeldy, Matthew Paul, and Jason Van Sickle. The executive session ended at 6:01 p.m. Mr. Tom Woods, Board President, Mr. Rodney Gotfeldy, Board Vice President, and Board members, Ms. Monica Rinker, Mr. Jason Van Sickle attended the meeting. Dr. Matthew Paul, Board member, attended the meeting at 4:33 p.m. Ms. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, Dr. Nicole Miller, Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Jane Wilson, Director of Human Resources, Ms. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, Mr. Richard Wazlowski, Director of Maintenance, Facilities, Operations, and Transportation, and Ms. Karen Brewer, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, attended all or part of the meeting. November 10th, board meeting. The Board of Education met in executive session on Thursday, November 10th, 2022 at 8:07 a.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, discussed a personnel topic pursuant to 3-305B1. Matthew Paul made a motion to go into executive session, and Jason Van Sickle seconded the motion. Final resolution motion carried, yea votes from Ronnie Gotfelty, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. Matthew Paul was absent at this part of the meeting. The topics discussed in the closed session include the following: personnel pursuant to 3-305B1, the board discussed the superintendent evaluation. Adjournment, Matthew Paul made a motion to close the meeting, and Ronnie Gotfelty seconded the motion. Final resolution motion carried. Yea votes from Monica Rinker, Ronnie Gotfelty, Matthew Paul, and Jason Van Sickle. The board adjourned the executive session at 3:40 p.m. The following board members attended the executive session: Mr. Tom Woods, board president; Mr. Ronnie Gotfelty, board vice president; Dr. Matthew Paul; Ms. Monica Rinker; Mr. Jason Van Sickle. The following staff members attended part of the executive session: Dr. Nicole Miller, chief academic officer; Mr. Jeff Gang, director of information technology; Mr. John Hummel, director of student services; Mrs. Donna Ashby, director of early childhood elementary education; Ms. Karen Brewer, executive assistant to the superintendent; Ms. Allison Schweitzer, director of finance; Mr. Richard Wazlowski, director of maintenance, facilities, operation, and transportation; Dr. Chelsea Mangus, director of special education; Mr. Paul Edwards, director of secondary education; Mr. Scott Germain, supervisor of food and nutrition services; Dr. Jane Wilson, director of human resources. Announcements?
Yeah, got a breath left.
Yeah, I still have some. All right, so this week is American Education Week, November 14th through the 18th. We were going to have several representatives, a couple of principals, and a support personnel to come and celebrate that. We did tell them that that was optional due to the weather conditions this evening, but we will work with Mr. Green to publicize American Education Week for the rest of the week and thank all of our educators for all of the work that they do. November 16th, the first grading period report cards will be released, and this is Educational Support Professionals Day. November 23rd, there'll be a 3-hour early dismissal. November 24th through the 28th, the Thanksgiving holiday, schools will be closed. December 6th is our next 3-hour early dismissal for staff development. And December 8th is the MAVE new board member orientation virtual training from 9:30 to 4 p.m. And I do believe our new board member has signed up to attend. Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. Fisk.
Correct, thank you. Okay, again, we'll do some recognitions at our
Right,
next.
we have some others.
There were several others that we've told tonight. We've had night to come out. So our first order of business, comprehensive maintenance plan for public educational facilities, an action item. We had this as information last month. So, Madam Superintendent, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, we did thoroughly review the plan, and my recommendation is to approve the comprehensive maintenance plan for educational facilities.
Okay, the superintendent has asked us to approve an action item in that regard tonight. Is there a motion of such? So moved by Rodney. Second by Matthew. Now have discussion. Rich, you want to make any presentation that will?
No, as you can see, there's a new format from the last one to this one. I have to thank Karen Brewer for putting this together. All the content stayed the same, and there was, yeah, I think that's about it.
Very modern, very nice, very well done. Yes.
I asked all the questions last month, but I thought of like 2 more.
Okay.
But I do like it. It is more eye-filling and catches your attention, easy to read with the orange and blue.
Yes.
When you look at like page 25, 26, or blacktop and paving schedule, roof replacement schedule.
Yes.
When we look at Northern Garrett High, like the year built, it has 1952/1995. I guess it's when they did some major renovations
Yes.
to it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So should we not put now in Grantsville, it says 1980, but all that was done, should it not have a slash to be 2022? Or not, or is that not?
The pavement's not part of the plan. Oh, okay, for
But
that.
I mean, just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you know, like
When
it
it's
has the year
complete,
built. Yeah, that's what I mean, like
Yeah,
I'm just wondering if we, shouldn't put that on there.
Yeah, well, we can add that upon completion.
Okay.
Yep.
And then like
Next month.
Hickory, on page 25, we need to carry the 1993 over, right? On page, like it just has the year it was built. We have it on page 25, Hickory by 1990, or 1966/1993. So then should we put the 1993 over on the year built under the roof replacement for Hickory? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Uh,
Mhm.
Okay. And then the last question. What, is there like an estimation, like the lay time of our blacktop and paving, or just whatever it needs? Do we think that we get it done, it'll last, say, 15, 20 years, or we can't really go by that?
Can't really go by
As
that. I
needs
mean,
basis?
we would think that we could do 10 good years out of it, but, you know, with weather and a lot of it, the blacktop, and we've been trying to fix a lot of the drainage as we do the blacktop.
Mhm.
Like at Northern Hive, we did the whole front, and we did a lot of re-drainage and, new pipage and that to kind of keep the water off of it, because that really, as water settles on it and
Mhm.
freezes and thaws and that really can kind of have an impact. And then traffic, obviously, the amount of traffic on it, so, yeah. Mhm.
That's all I had, because the rest of them were answered last month.
Other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to adopt comprehensive maintenance plan for education facilities. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. And, that is adopted. Thank you, Rich, for all of your work. Karen, thank you as well.
Yes.
For modernizing the presentation. Virtual day instruction plan. This is an action item tonight as well as we discussed it, last month. You have a recommendation.
Yes, my recommendation is to approve the virtual learning plan. It includes all of the MSDE required components. The suggested edits from last month have been included in the revised plan. At the time that the comments were due, we received 9, and then 11, 8 were in favor in lieu of snow days. One thing I do want to make sure to say is that, we will make every effort to call a virtual day if necessary based on the weather forecast as early as we can the day before. And we will still have regular snow days. I noticed that in a couple of the comments. We would still have regular snow days, because we are limited on this plan of how many virtual days we can call. But this is going to be a state-approved plan because we've included all of the components. So my recommendation would be to approve the plan this evening.
Okay, so the superintendent's, requesting, positive action on the, virtual learning plan. Is there a motion as such?
So moved.
So move for Jason. Need a second?
I'll second.
Second by Rodney. Can now have discussion and presentation.
Well, I think Ms. Baker gave a pretty good synopsis of where we're at. We are at a second read, and you should have last month's PowerPoint as well as the full submission to the Maryland State Department of Education, as well as the public comments that were submitted during the submission time. So I'm certainly here to answer any questions that you have.
Questions by, board members? I know one of the things that was discussed that the superintendent touched on was the earliest possible time to call that, as we're very sensitive to the fact that many teachers, planning periods do start at 8:30. And we certainly want, any teacher who, must come up with a virtual learning plan or, a synchronous plan, whatever the case may be, have an opportunity to do that, before they start their regular teaching. I have all the confidence in the world, superintendent will do that, along with Mr. Wazlowski as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Yes,
Just a few comments as I spoke to those in the community and the parents of some of the students who attend our system. One is, I think they like the option of virtual snow days, especially as we know sometimes in Garrett County, they can add up pretty quickly and of course extend the school year. One, right now, we have the Monday off after Easter. A lot of families have been taking advantage of that the last few years, being able to take a spring break, if you will, like many of our students do downstate as well. So just to kind of hear their feedback has been positive to me as we review the plan. Also, as a parent, I will say, snow days aren't easy, whether you do virtual learning or not, especially of elementary school students. So although it is challenging, I think it can be done. And again, I think it gives that instruction during kind of a key time frame, so they're not kind of having a lapse, compared to, as we all have heard teachers explain before, the end of the year gets a little bit more challenging. Students get a little excited, just like I do, whenever the sun starts to come out a little bit in Garrett County. So I think if we can use those as best we can, that this plan works.
Thank you.
Rodney?
Could you talk a little bit, Superintendent, about how a decision will be made on whether to have a traditional snow day or to have a virtual or
Right, well, as I said at first, we are limited to the amount of days that we can do a virtual plan to 8, and one of them, we had looked at the 91st day, because we do know for parents that has floated in the past, and that's been traditionally difficult. So we've kind of allotted that one first. Well, I don't know, first in the calendar, but that was one of our first priorities. So in making the decision now, and when we did it last year, Mr. Wazlowski and I, generally, when the forecast is bad, we start talking between, well, always the night before, and then usually 4:35 a.m. the day of a predicted event or the continuation of an event. And we talk to the bus drivers and contractors, we talk to the county roads, we talk to the state roads, we talk to our friends at the National Weather Service in Baltimore and Pittsburgh, because we recently were changed to the Baltimore area, and Pittsburgh was was pretty accurate in the past. So if it's as accurate as possible, and I will say that this is never an easy call, is it, Mr. Wazlowski? Every day is a challenge in trying to decide on the safest method of whether we call a snow day or not. So I would anticipate that if a really bad weather day was to be called, and we knew enough in advance that I could announce it, and we knew it was going to be pretty bad, we would call a virtual day if possible. If it's going to be a 3 or 4 day weather event, where a teacher would have to plan that far in advance, and we knew there was going to be a lot of ice or something, those might be called one at a time as snow days, because we wouldn't be able to predict how many days we would need to be virtual. And it's unlikely that a Monday would be called, because we would have to call that as early as possible on a Friday, because of allowing the teachers enough time to plan. So every single day is different. And our decision-making process really depends on so many other factors. But if it meets a clear-cut what we're looking for on a virtual day, and we know we have enough time, we will call that as virtual. And we'll try not to take too many of the contingency days if we don't have to.
So if you have a forecast for a 3-day day-in snow event, is it possible, and you have enough warning on that, you could say, okay, we're potentially going to do virtual days, make the first day of that event a traditional snow day, and then everybody would have their computers and everything ready for the second and third day. But can you split them up that way if there's a 3-day event and you have
We could. What we won't really be able to do is, if we've called a virtual day, if we've called it a day or two in advance, and we wake up and it's a beautiful day, we would not then have everybody come to school, because everybody's already planned for a virtual day and families have organized all of their plans. Now, we might be able to do the opposite and split it up into one virtual day and one snow day. It really will just depend on the timing, the forecast, but we could do that. The first one virtual, the next one a snow day, or vice versa.
But if you said both of them are going to appear, if you said both days are virtual, then what happened the last time is the weather cleared up.
The weather did not,
Beautiful
right,
day,
on that Friday.
Kids are all home.
Right, and that was a poor forecast. I can't, that's going to, I hope it doesn't happen again this year, but unfortunately, it was just as, they were calling for as bad or worse on that Friday.
So I think the policy's good. I just think, the key is how it's implemented. And so we depend on you and your staff and everything to reach to actually make that call, whether it's virtual or regular.
Yeah. As soon as we get an alert, which is 3 or 4 days before the actual event, that's when we start talking. And then we just talk more frequently as we get closer to the event. So, I think it's a very good option for families and students. Not all students are going to benefit as much as some others, but I will still say I think the days are more productive virtually than they are in the mid-June. They're not as productive those days.
And so you anticipate using the full number of days of snow, additional snow days?
It's possible. Last winter we didn't have very many snow days.
Hopefully we don't have it.
Right, so we didn't need to use them. I think 8 is a nice number, that if we did need to use all 8, we could certainly do that. I don't even know what the almanac says this year, but I know it's supposed to be a little colder. So, but each one really is its own individual call.
I think it's also important for folks who, emailed us and talked to us about it, that some of these things are mandated by MSDE. they're not our ideas, they're ideas
Right.
that are part of the template that we have to
Right.
abide by. So, you know, much of it is fill in the blanks. So,
True. And we
Yeah.
appreciate all those emails. We did read them all, even those that came in later.
Mhm.
And we certainly read all of the, comments that Mr. Green organized, the, data collection. And those have been shared with you.
Yeah, I
Comments.
do appreciate all the emails and want to say, I think, in some of the emails, it's clear that this isn't optimal, particularly for the youngest learners, and we recognize that. And so, we really have to be, smart and strategies to help those, teachers and, parents. But also, I think, recognizing that most of the parents who did give us feedback were in favor of it. So I think we take that side too. So, recognizing that there's balance here, and hopefully we don't have to use that many, and we'll use them judiciously and work through that. But I do think, it gives us some options and flexibility. You don't have to do that, but it gives you the.
I do like the
way that you can do
flexibility.
that.
Very helpful, yeah.
And, but the fact that MSDE has kind of given this and approved this template shows that they're at least in favor of it in theory. The other issue is that there are issues for, inequities as far as do that and don't, so that's another reason to avoid it as much as.
Monica?
One of my questions is, we said about keeping the 91st day, which I know is a floating day now, depending if we miss school between now, but tentatively, I believe it's set for January 26th, which is Professional Development Day. The students are to get out 3 hours early in the day, correct?
The 91st day isn't designated, I don't think it should say professional development, it's
Professional day.
Okay,
I think it's a
Maybe,
professional day.
Yeah,
okay.
that's the day that since it's the start of the second semester, that teachers have to, work on grades, work on planning the next semester, team meetings. It's not a staff development day, it's a professional day where they can work.
But that day is a 3-hour early dismissal, correct?
Yes.
So that's what it says on the calendar. But it looks like tentatively that might be scheduled as an asynchronous day.
That is the way the plan is designed.
So does that mean the kids won't come to school, correct?
Correct.
And will it only be half a day or be turned into a full day? Because that was the question that was even asked, I was asked.
Students will be given asynchronous work for that half day that
Okay.
was traditionally scheduled as a half day anyway,
Mhm.
in person. And staff would report to their work site for the entire day.
Right. Well, they were to begin with.
Correct.
So my question was for the students. So it will just be a half a day as planned, whatever that days it'll float will be, and they just won't come to school. They'll do their.
Correct.
Okay. That was one of my questions. I have a couple questions here directly to the virtual plan. On page 2, okay, in your block is the last paragraph. Staff without internet connectivity will be expected to go to the nearest GCPS location or their school to access Wi-Fi to deliver instruction and or to complete the essential functions of their job. So I guess my concern is, which we have different options of why we could use the virtual learning. One would be the weather might be bad. So in reality, if the weather's bad and we would cancel school, we probably wouldn't want our staff to go to the nearest location, correct? For Wi-Fi?
It would depend on the severity of the weather on that day. I mean, we certainly have people who go to their work site at Walmart and the bank and other locations on days that we have inclement weather, but the superintendent would make a decision. If it's really that bad, then it's probably going to be a closure of, like, of sorts. It's gonna be like a Sandy closure, like what, and it would turn into a snow day, exactly.
We can't keep the buildings open.
In some sense, the,
Well, I was asking for the way it was worded. It made it sound
But
like,
Now, however, there is a clause in there.
Asynchronous.
Yeah, there you go, thank you. Works better for those types of
Right.
issues as well, because
Already
you're
done.
sending home the packet or
Right,
whatever.
exactly.
There is a clause in there, though, that I should draw attention to, that if there is a unique circumstance for a staff member and some sort of emergency in their driveway or whatever, and we know that there's things that can happen. Maybe there's an accident right in front of their road and they can't get through, or
Or they normally have internet and have lost electricity, something like that.
there is a clause in there that they would work with their direct supervisor. Situations like that.
Well, a lot of days when school's called off, you have county government operating, and
Oh, yeah.
you know it's really bad when county government shuts
Yeah.
down.
Right.
State shuts down, so, those days I wouldn't expect the teachers to come in, right?
Not necessarily, again, as I said earlier, that would be a day-by-day call.
Well, when they're saying it's dangerous.
Oh, is
travel.
it? Or if
Government
everything else is
shutdown.
closed,
Yeah.
that would likely be a regular snow day, yes.
And I,
Right.
and I guess more too, which we had this before, we had the virtual learning, it was a concern. Some of our staff might not have internet connectivity, but just because of where they're located in the county, it wouldn't matter, you just, it's not able to get internet connectivity, so that might be,
That's pretty rare based on our estimations, that they absolutely would not be able to get any, internet activity, but, I mean, it does happen. But last year, we had data on that, and it was very, very few teachers who actually had to go to a work site.
right, I mean, I know it is.
It does
few,
happen.
but
It does
yeah,
happen.
okay, that
It does
was my
happen,
point.
and I will
It is,
definitely
yes, okay.
acknowledge that. It's just, but it's not a huge number.
So then I guess the other question,
Can we provide them a hotspot?
that was my next question,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Well, because we,
Yeah, I mean, could we do that?
So we historically did provide a hotspot because we were coming out of the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we obviously were providing hotspots for anyone and everyone who needed one. We are trying to shift away from providing hotspots because we're getting back to normal operating procedure, and the expense associated with them is far reaching in comparison to the few days that we would be using them.
And he's talking about, teachers.
Yeah, just teachers. Yeah,
The
just
teachers
for
don't
the,
have
just
internet.
for the winter months too. I mean, it wouldn't need it any other
You'd,
time.
you'd still have to pay. Do you want to talk, speak?
No, we would still.
Yeah,
You
you would still have to
You
pay.
can't just turn them on and turn them off. You have to really have them on for a period of time. And so, you know, we use federal COVID money to pay for those hotspots. And the federal COVID money that we still have remaining must all be spent on instruction right now. And so this really isn't a qualifying expense. So we, just as Dr. Miller said, we're trying to get back to the normal operating, and internet is I don't want to say a basic utility, because you're right, there are places in Garrett County that don't have, access. But that is changing. There's a lot of broadband money that is going directly to the counties, and they're changing that. So we're in a changing part.
I guess
So-
too, there is a factor that some places, or, staff or employees might have internet, but like it's really slow. So like sometimes I think the hotspots with an extra. So sometimes your Wi-Fi is reliable, and then sometimes it's not. You have no control of it. So that's something that we can't control.
It's not, yeah, it's not a perfect science. I mean,
Yeah, what happens
there are
if there's
gonna
a
be.
power outage during the storm? And so you got 15 teachers that were expecting to do the synchronous learning from home. All of a sudden, they don't have, power for their internet. So would they leave in the house and go,
If we had power in the schools, they certainly could.
as soon as
If
power?
if they could get to the schools, if it wasn't a situation where,
Right, and we
Ms.
could make
Baker
that
would-
on a case-by-case basis as well, if something like that were to occur. Certainly with ice storms, that is that's a possibility in Garrett County, always,
Just consider that.
always has been,
So, and I think this may come up in one of our comments that was given to us, just made me think. So when we said some staff might not have internet connectivity, so depending on the weather, they would be expected to go to the nearest GCPS location or school to have access with Wi-Fi. What if they are a teacher that has children of their own that are actually students in the school system? Would they be able to take them, if they would have been the babysitter for the day, because the kids are going to be in school, would they be allowed to take them with them to school to do their schoolwork?
no. I mean, we all report on snow days. We don't bring our children. I mean, they're working.
Yeah, but the situation I just talked about, when you're planning on doing the virtual,
If, like I said, with almost all of the questions, there could be individual case by case,
so they got their kids at home.
that they would have to talk to their principal or the supervisor about a different, arrangement. As a rule, no.
Oh, yeah, no, not on a regular basis, but I'm just,
Always gonna be.
Well, the
because of
hypothetical.
the internet, I mean, yeah.
Those are hypotheticals, you can't hurt.
I think we would trust the principal to make a decision in that situation, and you do say that they should contact their direct supervisor for alternatives for the day.
Okay. Page 3, accommodations. The second, paragraph down, second sentence, in the second paragraph. In some unique situations where virtual services are not appropriate, special education / related service will be made up to the child upon returning to in-person instruction. And I think I've seen it somewhere else. So I guess it would be figured out with the principal and the teacher, how they could have enough time to,
So we do that now. If a student misses school, we still provide the hours. We make those up when, even if a child misses on a regular day.
Could be compensatory, it could be during intervention time, it could be that we allocate some of our tutoring money or other flexible sources of money to be able to support that. So that I think there's a variety of ways to address making up that time, but we would make sure that the students get the services that they are required to have by law.
I guess I'm asking because I know, yes, if a child misses, like you said, they would get to work, but you might have you have multiple children possibly missing. That's the reason I was asking.
Yeah, those would be very far and few. I mean, that's a very unique situation with, in most cases, that's with students with, that would need very, very specialized instruction.
You got a question?
Just one more thing, so you have children in our school system now that didn't go through the, distance learning that we had 2 years ago. Is there are we gonna do anything for those children or their parents on how this thing works and special instructions? How you get the computer started up, is how you get onto the website? I mean, is that in the plan? It's
So,
not in the plan, but is that something you're planning on doing?
right, so we would work with principals to design plans for their building, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that we do have significant Schoology use happening within our county right now. Over the last month, I pulled this data today, actually, Mr. Schultz pulled it for me, so I appreciate his help in that, but in the last month, we had 1,247 elementary students active in Schoology. We had 7,232 submissions of some sort of submissions at the elementary level, over 59,000 views of content. That's all at the elementary level. At secondary, we had 1,834 active students. And we had over 117,000 submissions and over 715,000 views of content. So that calculates to roughly 88%. It's the vast majority of our student body that is in Schoology, that is using it fairly regularly over the last month at least.
I'm concerned
So,
first graders.
First and under, they're certainly going to have to take steps at the elementary levels to build that capacity. I do think the gap, the 12% gap, is likely to be the early childhood, pre-K, K1. So it's going to be incumbent on teachers, principals, our staff to help support those children by integrating some meaningful practice throughout the, weekly that they're getting on and doing those things. That has been an expectation. But we're going to have to follow through and make sure that those individuals are doing that and provided the support necessary to do so. And then obviously the communication. There is a section in here, I'd have to look to see the page number, but where the schools would share additional information that is very school-based, school-level information specifically to families. So that'd be a part of that.
things like step-by-step instructions on how to get on Google Meet and,
Right. So that actually was provided. So last year when we did virtual snow days with someone that had a pre-care, that wasn't part of the virtual system whenever we were going through the pandemic, they sent out instructions step by step. Even I figured it out. So, you know, I was able to get home.
well, that's good to hear.
You know that when you have citizens.
What was the number of secondary students here that engaged?
It was,
18?
over 1,800.
Those are duplicates, they're not.
No, they're unique.
We have 1,800 secondary students in our system.
They're unique. Because when you add those up together, it's 88% with the elementary and the secondary, so it's unique users. So we have 3,500 total students.
I know.
So 6 through 12, secondary, not just high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Say middle school, 2 middle schools, 2 high schools, come to 1,800 kids, that's almost 100%. That's why.
Secondary has
That's why I thought it
high
was-
usage, but that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
oh,
And your, that communication process is on page 5 of your plan.
thank you.
But I believe secondary is kind of required that they do it through.
Yeah, I'm not
Everybody
surprised
should
it's not
share.
high.
You know what
I'm
I
just
mean?
surprised
They have
it's that high.
Yes, it is, under the communication process. Thank you.
Well, you was talking about, excuse me, the younger kids. So I guess that would we expect our 3-year-olds or our 4-year-old programs to be on the devices too? Or have the paper pencil pack?
So MSD requires 4 hours of synchronous instruction.
Mhm.
We obviously would expect our teachers to make that developmentally appropriate. And so there would be lots of breaks and movement and, you know, entertainment occurring. I know many teachers who did some amazing jobs with pre-K students. But they're Garrett County Public School students, so we would be providing instruction synchronously for those 3-year-olds as well. I do think that, you know, teachers are probably gonna plan probably a little earlier in the process for manipulative things that those students can have at home or that they can easily get a hold of. But we also have collaborative staff with the Head Start partners in those classrooms as well to provide additional adult support that could help prepare those things for those classrooms.
Rodney, I believe you was asking about how you decide if it was a traditional day or a virtual day. You look at page 5. On the 4th paragraph down. It is important to note that the implementing a virtual learning day due to inclement weather will be another tool in the toolbox for GCPS. This option will be used on a case-by-case basis, particularly when there is confidence in the forecast that provides advance notice of significant storms. GCPS will continue to utilize 2-hour delays, 3-hour delays, 3-hour early dismissals, and traditional snow days when weather conditions warrant the use of these options. So that kind of answers what you was questioning. It's in writing that they will still do the other things too.
Now, everybody worries about, you know, whether the kindergarten kids and first grade kids and even younger can actually get on the computer and learn synchronously. And I'll tell you, I was down at my daughter's house and she has a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, soon to be 4, and there's these educational cartoons that are on TV, and you couldn't talk to them while they were watching that. It was like they were just glued to it, and you know, I couldn't believe it. And to me, they're sort of boring, but they were teaching them how to do the ABCs and counts and all those things. So
I mean, there are definitely challenges,
I think
but
it's possible to do it.
And our teachers are great. They will make it develop, they know their kids and they will make it developmentally appropriate. I have every confidence.
So I guess the teachers would already maybe have had discussions with parents to know, or they would already know maybe who would have internet, would be able to do, especially more younger. This is gonna be easy for secondary. But for our elementary students, if they would need the pencil packet submission, or they would need a device, like we already are a step ahead of that and already know this information in case.
so when we discuss this with the union, and this obviously, once it's approved, it'll be shared out, but the way we approached that was that at the secondary level, the teachers would survey the students, they'd say yes or no, we take the student's word, you know, and at the elementary level, the teachers would poll the parents. They're the most directly connected with the student and the families, as are the teachers at the secondary level with secondary students. So, you know, it was a self-report in the past, and it's going to continue to be a self-report. So we will provide what's necessary based on that report.
On page 6, attendance procedures for asynchronous days. It looks like if student submission occurs after 3 p.m., the student's attendance will need to be updated from absent to present the following day. And then it says for students without internet, if the student returns a paper assignment completed on the next scheduled school day, the student's attendance will need to be changed from absent to present. So I guess it's how it'll be, the attendance by their work being turned in, correct?
Correct.
On page 7, the first box at the top, I guess the second paragraph down. In the event that GTPS does not have many virtual inclement weather days, GTPS would like to have the option of implementing virtual learning on professional development half days that are currently scheduled on the 2022-2023 school calendar. So it says professional development. That means like our staff development, I think it's how it's worded on the calendar. So
That was actually requested by a board member last month that be added into the plan.
So, but to verify, because it says, I guess my question too is, it says professional development. We only have the one said professional day, but we had December 6th, February 17th, March 20th, April 6th, and May 16th say staff development. So should we have that wording switched to staff development to align with the wording on our calendar or not?
I mean, the state is not going to know the difference between those two. I think it's more important that we get that we communicate it. If we choose to implement that option, which we won't know until later, we have not decided to do that option at this point, but we wanted the flexibility to implement it. We had the number of days to do so. If we would choose to go that direction, then we would need to communicate that very clearly with our stakeholders and constituents to make sure that they knew exactly what day we were talking about. Those would be days that we could plan well in advance. It wouldn't be a last minute thing, I wouldn't think, because we know when those days are, and we would communicate it very clearly.
You have to approve it. Instead, have to approve that thing.
No, the superintendent could make that decision based on the fact that we put this in as a clause pending state approval of this entire document.
Is there a turnaround time of this from the state? Yeah, there was a turnaround time.
I anticipate, since we've checked all the boxes and it meets all of the requirements, as soon as we submit that it was approved, if it's approved this evening, I think it will be approved relatively quickly. I think last year it was a week or so.
So I guess, it's approved, and if that come to use, those half days for virtual days, like they're currently on the calendar as a 3-hour early dismissal. So if they were used, it would still be considered 3-hour early dismissal, and the students would still get that half a day's credit, but it would just not be.
They'd
be full day's credit. Yeah, full day's credit.
Even if it's 3-hour dismissal, we would do it.
If they were in
The
school.
teachers,
If they were in school, they'd still get
Just like,
full credit.
okay,
Just like today, they get credit for the full day, even though we dismissed 2 hours early.
okay, so it would. But I guess if it was asynchronous or synchronous would make,
Either way.
Yeah. Instruction.
page 10. Attendance protocols for synchronous virtual days. Okay, so there's a minimum of 4 hours of synchronous instruction attendance will be documented in PowerSchool. You go down under definitions. Present. A student will be marked as present when there is evidence of the following. So the attending classes via Google Meet during the scheduled time. Cameras turned on during the Google Meet. Right. And I'm just I remember before, when we was doing virtual, I think that was an issue for some. Some didn't feel comfortable turning on their cameras for multiple reasons. So I guess that would be a discretion, if the teacher heard the voice, it would be maybe discretion between the teacher and the student. I mean, if it has to be turned on, even, I mean, I understand the reason, but.
The expectation would be that the cameras are turned on in order to be counted as present for instruction on that day. If they are not turned on, then it would be an excused absence. There's always the potential that there would be an extenuating circumstance that could be principal approved or something specific to a scenario that I can't speak to, you know, that could be addressed. I would say that would be very far and few between. The general expectation is cameras will be on to be counted.
You don't want the camera system to be on, you want the student to be in front of them too.
We want the students to be in front of the camera, we want them to be engaged in the learning, absolutely. That's a given.
Yeah, I agree.
But let me just, but that's.
But I believe that there might be some that don't want their camera turned on for personal, just reasons.
Well,
It was in the background, maybe,
I mean-
or something, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, they can put a background up.
Yeah.
I mean, our students are savvy enough to do that.
Maybe not
Most of-
elementary, I guess
maybe
they
not,
could
well-
be, maybe taught to how to do it, but yes.
Upper elementary.
Yeah, yeah, older ones. And it says on here, page 13, it says bold black. School systems will have the opportunity to use a total of 8 days of virtual school days for the prescribed purposes. The days may be synchronous or asynchronous. However, no more than 3 of the 8 days may be used as an asynchronous day. So I guess my question is, what is the thinking? Would we, if the virtual days were used, would you do asynchronous, take advantage of the 3 before, or you would?
The way the
thought process.
The way the plan's written right now is that virtual inclement weather days would be synchronous instruction, and the only asynchronous day would be the 91st day. The methodology behind, at this time, the methodology behind that was when we created this plan to begin with, we certainly value in-person learning the most, but we also know that our testing occurs in a particular time of year. We also know that we're on a post-Labor Day start this year, and so we wanted to get as much instruction as possible in with continuity of learning, and the next best is synchronous, and then if we have to, asynchronous.
And if we use all 3 first, then we lose all of our flexibility if there was a time where some unusual thing happened that we needed to call an asynchronous day, because the maximum is 3. So our thinking was we didn't want to use all 3, that would take away all of our options.
One, based on the way this is written right now, the one will automatically be the 91st day, which takes us down to 2 maximum that we could use, and that's where we're at within the plan.
Just a couple comments and a question. Like they had stated, we did get many emails and comments, and then people would even said things to me, so I appreciate everybody that gives their input. There's pros and cons to it. It's something, it'll work for some and some it won't, I understand that. But I definitely agree it will be harder at the elementary level for multiple reasons. And one of the concerns I see on here too, which it act like if the 91st day is an asynchronous day, we'll know well in advance. But depending on what it's called, like Mr. Woods has stated, it would be better if it could be called by 8:30 in the morning because of planning time, especially more at the younger grades, because the middle school, high school kids have their devices they use every day. They take them home. So they already have figured out the internet connectivity, the charger, everything. Your elementary ones that don't have access to take RDA, you're gonna have to, it'll work, but get the devices to the teacher, the, whatever staff, get in the device, the charger, you know, we have kids this year, the younger grades that didn't use devices last year, so this will be new. Figure out to give instructions, because not all children, depending on who they go to, whether it's parent or grandparent or whatever, might not be technology savvy. So you're gonna have to send more, and then you said about the pencil and paper, you know, you have to have time to make the copies, maybe even send pencils, some might not have them. So there's,
Some of the instructions can be done well in advance. Like, we know we're gonna have potentially
Right.
virtual days, instructions and how to get on. And we should be able to train students as well as we go during just the regular school day. There should be opportunities to integrate that meaningfully in. So I do understand what you're saying. There is a significant amount of prep that goes into this, and I don't wanna discount that. However, some of it can be done before the day before the day.
Sure.
Monica's point, couldn't you deploy the devices if you had a weather forecast, a potential storm day, and you're 2 days out, couldn't you deploy the devices, the homes, 2 days before? And then if it happens,
In most cases, yes, we could. There might be some outliers that we wouldn't be able to
You have the
do.
capacity to do that.
Yes.
School-based decision to not.
well, that might be one way to adjust some things Monica said.
My guess is most schools probably have a plan in place, but
Yeah.
they're waiting for us to approve this
Yeah.
plan before they send it out to parents.
All right.
Why would they send it out prior to us approving?
Bingo.
and then I guess all of the work that they complete, whether it be pencil, paper, or online, they'll all get grades for it, correct? This is if they were in school. It's all.
There would be teacher discretion as to what they apply grades for. I mean, not every single assignment is
Just
graded.
now.
Some of it is it would be the same as what they do on a regular day.
Right now, today.
Teachers would make that decision. Okay. But students who are absent would be responsible for making up the work. I mean, if they are absent on the virtual day, they will still be responsible for the work.
Right.
And not any grades associated with that work.
My last question I think of, is we have in our calendar, I believe we have like we have to build in 5 days every year. So would the thinking be that we would try to use some of those 5 days first? So we have built into the calendar before, the virtual learning played in effect, except for the 91st day? Or is there, just depend on case to case?
It's case by case, but there are 10 days built into the calendar, of which 6 of them are at the end of the year. So we have 4 to work with during the regular school year, but
I believe it was Thanksgiving break Monday, November 28th, January 16th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, February 20th, President's Day, April 10th, Easter Monday.
but it'll be case by case, and that is detailed in the plan that we will use our standard operating procedure to use makeup days if it makes sense and.
And we can't use Martin Luther King Day or President's Day without state board approval anyway. So we can't use those as school days without their permission.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. We have a motion on the floor, to adopt the, virtual, day instruction plan. And second, those in favor, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
It's a 3-1 for the
Thank you.
virtual day instruction.
Thank you.
We do have 2 people that would like to, comment, so I need to read that. And, Here at County Board of Education is pleased to receive comments and ideas from our public pertaining to policies, procedures, and practices of the school system. We ask that the comments be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes per individual, unless otherwise considered by the board president. There will be no discussion or action taken at this meeting, but may be considered at a future meeting. Issues that are specific to the individual employee should be referred to immediate supervisors for appropriate consideration or review. Rude slanders or threatening remarks or other behavior that is disruptive or interferes with the order of the meeting is not permitted. Our first speaker is Dave Moe, who wants to talk about the CIB.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm here to speak about the CIP. I've been trying to find a copy of it as passed by the board since the board met with the Garrett County Commissioners about the CIP. Have access to the source document. It is not on board docs as I was led to believe. I was led to believe that it's now been removed, and I'd like it to be,
We'll make sure it's on our website. It should be on our website.
yeah, it should
If
stay
it's
on
not,
the
we'll make sure
website.
that we'll make sure that it's on there. If it's not,
I would
apologize if it's
appreciate
not.
that. Thank you. Thank
You know, Karen,
I've been on there,
Okay, we will ensure that.
and then I can see a maintenance, planning and maintenance, but I can't see the separate FY '23. Appreciate that, thank you.
yeah, we'll make sure. Well, we all, I have a paper copy, but I don't look at it online.
It's here.
It's there, where is it?
It's under last month's meeting,
Under last month's meeting.
under 7B.
But I understand what you're saying, Matt.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can print it off or get it to him.
Yeah. The other thing is, since I was at the meeting with the board and the commissioners, there seemed to be a resolution that the board would meet with the commissioners for future actions on, CIP documents, and plans. And there was an agreement, what I would view as a temporary or an agreement, that there would be a next meeting requested by the board with the commissioners. Is that correct?
I don't know.
I think that's more for the next following year's CIP to have discussions before whatever we want to support from them brings them in advance. I believe that's what they were speaking in regards to.
I think it was an overall conversation in terms of the commissioner's desire for us to meet with them as we move forward with footprint, grade banding, different things we might be working towards, so that they know that, it may impact, their financial decisions for us. And we have said that we would do that. That is our intention to do that.
Okay. And since at that meeting with the board and the commissioners, the board or the commissioners indicated from the CIP what they were probably going to be able to fund. So is the board going to amend the past CIP to coincide with that agreement?
You want to speak to it?
I don't think we can answer that right now.
Yeah, that's
We don't
the
know.
answer is, we don't know until we decide several things. Ranging from footprints, grade bands, et cetera, will impact our CIP going forward. The CIP is presented as it is at this moment in time, without any alterations, anything we're doing in the system. If we were to alter the system, it will alter the CIP.
I think, what we should mention is that it's really year by year, the next year are the things that are approved now.
Right.
And then the future years, we go back next year
And then those.
for that next
Right.
CIP.
And you have to submit major portions of this to the state committee. When do you expect to hear back, or when is it anticipated for any county to hear back?
December 21st.
Thank you.
That's their tentative date to give us.
Up or down or whatever.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. You don't need to speak, Josh. All right, thank you. We will now move on to JLIG, Registered Student Sex Offenders Entry into School Property Policy. It's an action item. So, Madam Superintendent, I know you're doing both. You're
Right.
going to present and you're going to recommend, so
Yes,
let's
well,
recommend first,
all right.
then you can present.
Right, my recommendation this evening is to approve the policy. We are required by MSCE and recent legislation to allow for a student who is a registered sex offender to receive an education, but must also limit the authorization of the student's entry onto our property. the policy and procedure document process for meeting these requirements. There were no comments or questions received from the board or the public. However, the recommendations received during the first read have been included specifically, and I'll go ahead and move on to the presentation part from Mr. Hummel.
Hang on one second, let me see if there's a
Oh,
motion
I
and
get
a
a
second.
motion, my fault, sorry.
Is there a motion to adopt? Motion by, Jason, is there a second? Second by Matthew. Now, please present.
Okay, so, last month, Mr. Hummel outlined this in detail. It was suggested that we, make sure to identify that this is student registered sex offenders. So we have included that in the title and the cross references on both the policy and the procedure as updated after last month's meeting. And then on the second page of the procedure, the areas where it said should, which was in, the first paragraph under communication, those were changed to will as the request of the board. So, you already have my recommendation and a motion. Those were the only changes. And as I said, there was no feedback received.
Questions? Discussion?
This doesn't impact a whole lot of students that are attending Dare County.
No, luckily it's very few. However, much like other things, we educate all, to our best of our ability, we educate all children, and that includes these children. We just have to make sure that we have provisions in place. But luckily, it's very few.
Anything else?
He answered last month, makes sense.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adopt the, read that, JLIG registered student sex offenders entry onto school property policy. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is unanimous.
Thank you.
We now have enrollment and revenue estimates, presented by Ms. Schweitzer.
Good evening. This is an informational item only. And, normally, we present this information at the October board meeting, but, with all the changes that are being implemented as a result of Blueprint, we did delay this by a month. And it is a bit of an expanded, presentation tonight. So the budget development process is very similar year after year. And we always begin with internal planning October 1st. As soon as the audit is finished, we start here in the central office. But this year, we've added a month to our calendar, really to work on educating all of our stakeholders on the changes that are required of Garrett County Public Schools as a result of the Blueprint. So you can see we've added that into this little chart, and that's what we're doing here. So this is a slide from a presentation that the state superintendent and his staff made to the state board on October 25th. And I pulled them out because they very efficiently explain some of the budgetary changes that we're required to make. So the overarching one that you're going to hear me talk about, I'm really pillar 5, which is governance and accountability. And so when we're talking about this, we're talking about more of the nuts and bolts of how we're going to do this, not necessarily what we're doing. So the overarching change is really a philosophical change to a weighted student funding formula. And what that means is that there's going to be a base per pupil amount, and then we add a weighted amount based upon the demographics of those students and what they're eligible to receive. So it depends on if they're an English learner, if they're a free and reduced meal student, if they are in a certain grade. So all of these subgroups have a percentage of the base that will be added to their enrollment. And then there's also some program amounts that are just a flat amount. For Garrett County, that we only receive one, and that's the Blueprint Transition Grant. It's a $1.2 million piece of funding that we've received for many years. unfortunately, that will be going away in the out years, but right now, regardless of our enrollment, that dollar amount is hard-coded in legislation.
I was just talking about the program on that. Okay. The next one is good.
Yeah.
The program amounts to the guaranteed tax state aid program. It just provides additional state aid to LEAs that have less than 80% of the statewide average wealth per pupil. So that's not us, right?
Right.
And then it also says, provide funding above the local share required by the foundation program. So the program encourages less wealthy jurisdictions to maintain or increase local education tax. So does that mean that our jurisdiction does increase local education through tax efforts, that we would get more money through this program amount?
No, both tests have to be,
That's where I saw that.
right, that's why you have the and there. So, yeah, it has to be both. So, and unfortunately, we will never qualify for the first one. So, that less than 80% of the statewide average.
Unless we really have a disaster situation after our economy does.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry.
When you were saying about the weighted amount, you said, for example, English learner, farm student, and you said grade. What did you mean by the grade? Did you get?
Well, if we go to the next slide, there are all these weighted amounts in this box. So you have the pre-kindergarten aid, so that's one of the grade amounts. You also, for college and career readiness, you know, it depends on, there's also the transitional supplemental instruction that is K through 3. So that's what was meant
Okay,
by
so
the
for like the program. On my mind, I thought this second grade maybe versus fifth or sixth grade. It's more the program for the grade levels.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. But the formula is based off of the enrollment in that grade times the weight of the foundation, and that's how you get to the amount. So the phase-in of the blueprint is obviously 10 years. We've talked about that a lot, but there's changes in the target per pupil foundation. It's hard-coded in law out to 2032. And then there are the formula weights of all of these aid types that say weighted amount. That percentage as a part of the foundation amount is also hard-coded in legislation, as well as the eligibility criteria. So one instance of eligibility criteria is starting for FY24, pre-kindergarten students must also have a low income threshold. And then in FY25, that threshold changes. It's also the same with the concentration of poverty. The percentage of the farm students at a specific school, it changes, but it's hard-coded in law. So that's how the phase-in is structured. Any questions about that? Okay. So the last slide that I borrowed from Superintendent Chaudhary is to really show what the state is participating in Garrett County Public Schools. And so this was a deep dive that they presented in Washington County, and it's showing the per pupil state funding trends. And so in the state of Maryland, since fiscal year 2019, Maryland has increased 23% from FY19 to FY24 on a per pupil basis. One thing that's important for this board to understand, though, is from a local level, the local per pupil amount of increase has been just 4%. So because of the way that the formula has been derived, the local contribution on a per pupil basis has only increased 4% over those years, whereas the state has increased at 19%. Again, that point where the local contribution becomes more than the state is purely based off of our wealth. So, are there any questions about?
Senator Gunn, I don't understand why we're projecting less local funding in '24 than in '23. You're just basing that on the formula, right?
Mr. Gluckstein, we lost 54 students,
Well, okay.
and it's based on per pupil. So when you lose that many students,
But that's not what I'm asking. So if the county is currently, giving 28,817, or 28,817 to the local schools, would that mean that they're gonna be reducing the amount that they have to put forward for local funding next year?
possibly, if maintenance of effort is more than the local share, this is the maintenance of effort amount.
That's what they're required to put in.
That is what they're requiring.
That they couldn't keep funding at a level. From what we did here. If they did that, then we'd see, actually, it wouldn't be as bad as what this is.
Right. So let's, if we could, just finish with the presentation, then we'll get to the actual projection. So then the weighted student funding that we were talking about, this methodology that we're changing to, the requirement that Garrett County Public Schools will have to abide by is that we're going to need to budget, monitor, and report at a school level by program. So our budgeting is going to change. You know, our autonomy to be able to locally make decisions is going to be limited going forward. So right now, the staff is analyzing historical trends, how we've spent our money, how we've done our budgeting in the past. Also dissecting the allowable costs as they are written in law for all of these different program revenues, so that we can match up the items that we're already doing that coincide with those allowable costs with those program revenues. The implementation plan for Blueprint is in full swing now. We are almost on a daily basis attending virtually at a state level what's happening with this implementation planning process. So we will know December 1st, the AIB is adopting what that implementation plan looks like. And nice, maybe not nice, I don't know. It's going to coincide with our entire budget process. So we'll be able to leverage a lot of the work we're doing for Blueprint implementation, for that template, for that reporting requirement, while we're in the middle of our budget process, and it'll align with it. So that'll be really valuable for us, because it's not that we're doing the plan in the summer where we can't really change things. So I know it's a little bit delayed, but in my mind, I think it's probably a good thing for us. So the bottom line, though, is that we are required to move to weighted student funding.
So when you talk about it, the budget and on the report, so in my mind, I'm thinking of tracking. So who comes up with like your charts, your system track it? Like, do they give you something they want you to use, or is it something we have to model on our own in our school system?
So part of the Blueprint was a requirement that MSDE must update their financial manual, as well as all of the student and financial reporting systems. So I am on both of those committees for with MSDE, but the problem is those deadlines aren't until June 30th of 2023. So while we're reporting now on this information, but it hasn't been built yet. But we have a seat at the table to help build it. So I think that's what's important right now. But
So at a county level, will we see more of this, or things might change starting what, in the school year in the fall? Or is like, I'm just trying to understand like the next budget?
Right. So MSDE and the AIB are using FY '23 as the benchmark year, as the base year. And we are reporting every month on these programs, the spending on these programs. But we must build an FY '24 budget that follows this weighted student methodology, funding methodology. So here's our historical enrollment trends, and this chart is one that we have presented. Actually, last year we presented it a couple times, but it is capturing kindergarten through 12th grade enrollment, and the reason is because we were seeing the foundation or the targeted per pupil amount only on kindergarten through 12th grade enrollment. So unfortunately, we don't receive that foundation amount for pre-K, regardless of their, the eligibility of their income. So we did decrease 54 students year over year, and in the past 10 years, we've increased almost 16%. So. One thing we did want to share, this is important to Mrs. Baker, is that, you know, we take a lot of time and effort to make projections, and we work very closely with the Maryland Department of Planning. And in June, we presented a presentation, we presented projected revenue and enrollment figures to the elected board in public session. And at that time, our estimation or our projection was that we believe we were going to be at 3,290 students, and the 930 count came out at 4.25 above that. So that's very close. And so I just wanted to highlight that you know, we're taking all the information we can to try to make the very best projections that we can. Okay. And so here we are, this is showing even, you know, further out to 2028, and this is aligned with the Maryland Department of Planning projections, and then in the orangish red is the Garrett County Public School projection. So whereas we don't exactly completely align, we're close, and the trend line is fairly similar. So. Okay, and so here we go, Mr. Gladfeldy, 2-year revenue estimates. Yeah, so.
What's important there is how much we have to make up next year, how much we're gonna lose when we fall off the cliff and that kind of thing. So that's why these are really important.
Yes, so in FY '24, we still do have the COVID federal relief funds that are at our disposal. I will say they are very targeted and they are very purposefully spent. We're also highly accountable for how we're spending and the types of results that we're getting from spending that money. So, you know, it is very specific what we're using that money for. But back to our unrestricted projections. So the way that these were generated was a little bit different than prior years, because we do have the full amount that each student, based upon their subgroups, should be receiving. There are still a couple revenue programs that are based off of different inflationary figures that I don't have yet, but this is a pretty close estimate of what we think our unrestricted revenue will be. As you can see, it's pretty much flat funding. You know, we're not looking at capturing even an inflationary increase. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. But again, this is following for local funding. this is the maintenance of effort. This is as if the maintenance of effort is the higher of the two. And we won't know if the local share is higher until the wealth is calculated into the split.
Allison, it's important, well, and this certainly is gonna be something ongoing that we're gonna have to do as a school system to educate the people, the citizens in our county, in that the changes are so dramatic that in essence, the money follows the student now. And if the student goes to a certain school, the money goes to that certain school, depending upon what that student is allotted. And I don't know, that's gonna be a difficult thing for people to understand, that the autonomy that we once had with money has greatly disappeared. And the autonomy that the superintendent had to give money to certain schools versus other schools has totally disappeared because of that side. That becomes, I think, a charge that we have, is how we get that out there, that people understand that, not only are we gonna get less money than we've ever gotten, we're not gonna be able to control it either. So it's a very difficult, cliff that you keep bringing us to.
And it's a perfect storm when you consider all the things the blueprint is going to require us to do. Teacher salaries, the fact that all our costs are going up 7%. You can't live in an environment where you're having level funding. It just won't work.
Right.
Unless you make some
Unless you make
really
drastic changes.
drastic changes in what you do, how you operate.
So that's why I'm concerned about the level funding.
So then, the last slide is really our outlook for this budget development process that we're in for FY '24. So we are in a very high inflationary environment, and right now, utilities, I think, are the worst that we're dealing with at this moment. We're also having staffing challenges. We're having a really hard time finding qualified individuals to fill our positions in it, and it's likely going to get worse as our seasoned population moves into retirement. So that's very concerning. We talked about the federal funding cliff. We do have FY '24 and '25 to, part of '25 to work on. And then you said the blueprint, and that's really the roadmap that we have to follow. And right now, I think that is overarching our biggest budget initiative, is to really understand the blueprint, understand what we do in Garrett County Public Schools that already aligns with the blueprint, and build on those things.
Questions?
I have one. Just around curiosity, and maybe more for Jane than what it is for you, Allison, but, so what's the starting salary for teachers of the surrounding counties in West Virginia and PA? Once we move in the blueprint and we're starting at 60, my gut is we're gonna outpace them pretty quickly. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah. Right now in West Virginia, we're much higher. Our starting salary is $48,000. And that's probably step 5 for West Virginia. Pennsylvania, we're right even. But as our counties move further east in Maryland,
Sure.
they are higher than we are.
We should be able to recruit heavily from the surrounding counties in West Virginia and PA as we move forward, correct?
Is the criteria
You would hope so.
applied?
So his question was, what's the criteria? So in Maryland, we do have a very high standard for our teachers passing tests, the number of credits. So it is a little bit higher than surrounding counties, yes, sir.
Other questions?
This one. I meant to ask you on page 4, under pre-kindergarten, just, because currently no standing families at or below 300% of federal poverty level count toward pre-kindergarten. So where is the federal poverty level, chart at, or, like, I'm just curious, where do you find it? Like, we were talking about it, where do you actually see
I think you can Google it.
It's
Yeah.
census data.
Yeah.
So that's what
You
this
can
is
get a quick back,
based on
census
then,
quick back for their
beginning in
county.
fiscal year 2025.
No,
Oh,
Okay,
now,
it's
sorry.
2024.
Yeah, okay.
It changes. Yeah, that's right.
We never had to use that before, did we? The federal poverty, so this is new. For the criteria.
Yeah.
Well, it's more universal for pre-K for us, right? So, yeah.
The test used to be that it was full day and you offer universal, which we passed the test with flying colors. And so we received the funding for all students that were enrolled in pre-K as of 9/30. But now there's an eligibility test.
Would that apply for a 3-year-old student?
Yes,
So does that
The
mean-
same poverty chart will be for a 3-year-old.
yeah.
So we have in school.
Does that mean it's not gonna be universal in their county anymore?
Well, the thing is, you would just not get paid for those students.
Well, I know,
So
but we
it's-
haven't made the decision to do that yet, have we?
Well, the way that the law is written is that there can be a share of the family pays a share, or you work something out with your local government, or you just absorb the cost and your foundation program covers the,
But that's potentially something we might lose, you know, the fact that it's free for everybody right now,
yeah, possibly.
which is a shame.
So this federal poverty level chart for 3 and 4-year-olds, that'll take effect this fall when they come to school?
This estimated funding, it takes effect for this funding year,
Okay.
for FY '24. So the students who are there right now,
Yeah.
we know what tier they fell into on our student data system. So we know how many of them we're gonna get paid for and how many of them we're not gonna get paid for.
So the reason I'm asking is we have a policy procedure and interest into pre-K, like, there's like, so we might have to review that and change some of the wording.
That's
all part of the blueprint implementation.
Right, yeah.
That is definitely going to be addressed in the implementation
Mhm.
template.
That won't be the only one, there'll be other things that we have to do as part of that plan.
The biggest change right now is that it would be moving from 185% poverty to 300%.
To 300.
So more students are technically eligible if we didn't have universal, but we have universal, so.
Right.
So in a couple of years, we might have enough money to cover what we're covering now.
Well, and that's gonna be a decision that we'll be faced with as to whether or not we'll continue to.
And the eligibility increases, so there'll be more money coming because they're up.
The money comes based on the student who is eligible.
Right.
So if we have more students that are eligible, then we will get funding for the eligible students.
Once you get up to 300% poverty, that gets a lot.
More people would qualify than at the 185% level. Yes. But that's, but it's not gonna be everyone. We have families at 600%, we have families that are over income that we currently are serving.
Right, yeah. You know, we've never received the same FTE for pre-K as we do for K through 12. You are well aware of that. But we've always placed a very high priority on our early childhood program of pre-K and now expanding it to 3-year-olds. But our partnerships with Head Start, our duty centers, our early childhood education initiatives have all been geared to the fact that we place a very high value on preparing those children for kindergarten and the rest of their school years. And it's been a pretty successful model for us for a number of years that we've been able to offer universal.
So important.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredibly important.
Well, thank you, Allison.
So, we're sure we'll have a lot more to say.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be having every month.
We will.
I have, our student member, who actually asked her not to attend tonight because of road conditions and whatnot, so I'm gonna read her report, for her. On October 20th, members of Southern Northern Student Councils met at Garrett College for a GCASC meeting. At the meeting, Ms. Crawford The MASC Assistant Executive Director and Kelly Bokum, the MASC Division 1 Liaison, gave a presentation to better understand what MASC is and the events that occur throughout the year. We also had a parliamentary procedure workshop as well as discussion focus groups. Yesterday, GCASC members met virtually where we discussed a possible fundraiser idea of a Spirit Day at a local restaurant like the Green Turtle. On November 23rd, many of the members will go to the fairgrounds to decorate our pet-themed tree to support Heart for the Festival of Trees. We also discussed new ideas for the next General Assembly on December 8th. Our next meeting for GCASC members will be on November 28th at Brenda's. Southern High School Student Council had a blood drive on October 24th, which was a huge success. We had over 30 volunteers. The Powder Puff game that was set for October 13th was a great hit for the students. Southern is currently working on organizing the Ram Rumble that is set for Wednesday, November 23rd. They are also working on organizing the light show at Southern High School's old football field. The dates for the show are December 2nd, 3rd, 9th, 10th, 16th, 17th, 22nd, 23rd. Northern High Student Council just wrapped up a fundraiser selling gourmet apples and pretzels. Southern's fall homecoming was scheduled for October 29th and had a great turnout. Many students gave positive comments about the dance. Many students have also reported that the water bottle filters are greatly appreciated and are being used every day.
Awesome.
That's Alexis report from the two schools and the county SAC. The only thing we have are board member updates. Is there anything from any board member you want to share with public?
Go ahead.
You can talk right
Yeah,
ahead.
that's what you do.
Well, just keep in mind that the Northern High School Thespian Association, group is doing a play in the Art Center this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I think. And, if you want to see the new Performing Arts Center, it might be a good opportunity and to get our students a little bit of,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to see that. I saw a play there a couple of weeks ago, and it's really, you'll really like it. The lighting, the sound, everything's great. And the other thing I wanted to mention is Maeve has asked me to be on the ad hoc committee for blueprint implementation.
Oh.
So they are studying that because they're going to make recommendations on maybe changes that need to be made to the blueprint in the coming year. So I think I welcome everybody's feedback on that, that's why I keep asking these questions. How can we make the blueprint better for us that'll get us more money? So I think my concerns are, I heard a lot of that at the legislative meeting the other day. And I'll try to send you the Maeve's priorities for next
We already
year.
have.
Yeah, they should be in your packet.
They're in the,
You got beat up, just in that meeting.
Allison.
Yeah.
Good to Allison.
But, the discussion that goes on around those priorities, I mean, there was a lot of discussion from counties that are in the same boat as we are. There's not enough money to implement, all the changes that the blueprint is requiring us to do. And so, it's a big concern, not only for us, even for relatively, more wealthy counties than us, like Carroll County. They don't have enough money to do what the blueprint's requiring. St. Mary's County, there's a lot of counties on the Eastern Shore, so we're not alone in all this. It's a consolation.
Rodney and Monica and I went downstate and met with the State Board of Education since the last meeting. Talked about a lot of the issues with the state board that we talked about here locally, including funding, right? Declining enrollment was brought up. We talked about behavior issues in the school system. I'll give you my take and they're welcome to give you theirs. It was great that they were definitely willing to hear our concerns. They did offer some solutions to some of the problems we had. It was interesting because it was much like other state issues that you bring to other parts of the state. We had to remind them that internet access isn't broadly available in our area because oftentimes when we were talking about mental health, they were talking about teledoc and services like that aren't necessarily always available to here in our county. So it's definitely great to get their feedback and for us to voice some of the concerns that we had to the State Board of Education, and they welcome continued feedback. And I think this is one of many of their road shows. They're gonna go to different parts of the state and invite 3 or 4 surrounding counties to attend.
Thanks for mentioning that. I thought it was a real.
That's what Monica, I thought you were talking about.
Well, I had a lot of other things, but I think it's, you know, getting in front of that group made me more comfortable about, reaching out to them about concerns.
Absolutely.
Actually, you know, it's a really good
It was a
opportunity.
very good idea. It was a
So
good
we
idea.
thank them for coming out to Western Maryland, even though, you know, they could have got a little bit closer to your town.
One other note, not related to that is, I also want to thank, Mr. Hummel, as well as the guidance counselors of both Southern Middle School and Northern Middle School. We did go in and do the Maryland Scholars Program to the Maryland Speakers Bureau this year, to all classes, at both schools. So that was, you know, good to talk to them a little bit about real life and what to expect and, you know, how they can kind of plan for their future, knowing that high school scheduling is right around the corner after college.
I told him his policy was approved, and he's watching, so he probably heard your thing. So.
Mike, do you have anything to add about the meeting?
No, it was wonderful. We went down there. I think we were the first county state to scare Allegheny, Washington. And you're right, I think they'll do more. But they actually, we got to speak, each one of us, but then they actually had conversations back. So it was a back and forth, so that was a really good dialogue.
It's like meeting with them after the meeting too. They come up and talk to you.
Yeah, I've had a couple conversations with Mr. Crawford on the phone. He seems very intent on
He is.
getting throughout the state
Yeah,
to help people in the outlying areas, not
They
just,
were-
not just people in the populous areas.
yeah.
I like to talk about the Maryland Terps to him, so. He's a big fan.
They were even taking notes of things that we were saying, which I thought,
He
I'm
seems
sure
very
they were really
sincere,
listening.
very sincere.
And what was nice is we got to hear
Allegheny.
Washington County go before we did.
Where they
To
were.
hear some of the repeat topics that were brought up.
Farnborough, I believe, supported the ag trailer that was here. I don't know if they do it at some of the elementary schools. I think actually all the elementary schools. And it was, a good thing, and I was to be a volunteer with that. The kids do some activities.
Just a couple quick things. We did get the May, agenda. Everybody has a copy of those, of what they're for and what they're against, the upcoming legislation. We did, get the, letters sent over to the commissioners. Barb and I signed that, and it was sent over, I guess, today, wasn't it? This morning. Requesting, what we agreed upon at our meeting with the commissioners. So we'll be anxious to get a, hopefully, a letter of approval back from them on the 22nd, I think they mean. And then the IEC hopefully will follow suit very quickly so we can get started. And then the last thing that I'll mention is Dr. Miller gave us a blueprint on Maryland's future update for information. I would certainly encourage each of you to go to draft initial implementation plan. You will have some amazing reading if you've not done that so far. Those are the informational items that we have. That will end our public session. We are still in executive session, however. We did not finish our executive session. So, once again, gentlemen, thank you for coming. I think one of you will see more frequently.
We haven't cleared it off.
Yeah.
Nope.
Not yet?
Careful going home, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I'll talk to you in the morning.